Hi, my name's Mark O'Leary and welcome to the next edition of Arrow Insights. And today I'm joined by Matt Ashton, one of our experienced advisors here. And it's commonly assumed that wealthy families and business owners don't have a need for insurance. Is that the case, Matt, in your experience?
I think that it's a common, as you said, it's a common assumption that because you've got a lot of wealth, you can afford to basically not have any insurance in place. But a lot of our clients and many of our clients have small businesses where it's very important to have continuity in terms of business structures.
Yeah.
You would have found that as well in your experience, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. And I probably like you, I've sort of found over the years that many clients forget about the importance of their business in the overall context of their planning and don't think about how to protect that major asset against the consequences of death or even the sale of the business. You would have found the same, sure?
Yes. So I guess the most common example of how it can help the business is if you've got any sort of debt within the business, and those debts are often in small businesses secured by directors' guarantees. You have the death of one member of a partnership, for example, that can have a serious effect on the ongoing continuity of the business. So having in place an appropriate strategy with insurance funding will just make sure that they can continue to operate.
So that's at a partnership level and also a director level?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. And have you, your experience with private wealthy families in terms of protecting their beneficiaries against the consequences of death by including insurance so that family members aren't selling assets, that you come across?
Yeah, a lot. So particularly where you've got large assets that are somewhat illiquid, like a business asset or like significant property assets, just having that in place, to have that insurance come in will give a lot of certainty to the clients.
So when we talk about insurance, there's virtually three streams, isn't there, in terms of life insurance and disability cover and also income protection, which is often overlooked as well by business owners, despite the fact that the revenue they generate out of their business is their biggest asset in many ways.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so it really depends on the client's situation. So I won't say that every wealthy client will actually need insurance. It means we need to go through a detailed assessment and identify exactly what the implications are if something happens to a client. So I'm sure you've found this as well. If you've got a founder in the business or a key person and they're responsible for a lot of the revenue generation, that having that sort of income protection in place to make sure that the family can continue to operate, but even if there's a temporary setback in terms of illness or injury, it's really important to keep the security of the family in place.
And in many ways, it helps ensure the payroll, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. What's your experience in terms of insurance planning within the next generation of our families that we look after?
Yeah, so normally what we do find is you might have the first generation that's done a lot of their planning and had an appropriate risk management plan in place. But their children may not have gone through the same process. Maybe they don't feel that they have the same needs, or they think that mum and dad are going to be able to help out. But ultimately, a lot of our clients have their capital tied up in their business and investment interests, so they can't just sell up everything just to help out their children. And family is generally a very important motivator, if you like, for our clients. So they want to be able to help out, but if the next generation hasn't looked at their own insurance planning, they could run into issues.
Yeah. And going back to mum and dad, if you like, the first generation. Is there a role for insurance in terms of equalising an estate, for example?
Oh, absolutely. Particularly, again, come back to diversity of assets. So that's what it comes down to: diversity and liquidity of the asset portfolio that you have in place. And if you've got, say, for a big asset that forms the bulk of your wealth, and you've got multiple children that you want to provide for in a family succession point of view, then insurance might have a a role to play in terms of funding and equalisation strategy between the two, two children or multiple children. And this is especially important where you've got perhaps one member of the family that is more involved in the business, in the family business.
In terms of insurance planning, it's not just a question of how much insurance somebody might need, but the question of ownership is a really important one, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is.
So how do you plan for that?
It's really coming down to say, okay, who owns everything?
Yeah.
So we go through a process when we're looking at it is saying, okay, who controls each asset? Where do the assets sit? And where may you have some issues with actually funding? If I can just go off track a little bit, this is important from a taxation point of view as well. So if you've got assets with very large unrealised capital gains in them, you don't necessarily want to sell those assets in order to actually fund this, fund any sort of death situation, if you like. So. Having an insurance in place can be a cost-effective way to actually make sure there's a pool of funds available to extinguish any commitments that you might have.
So the concept of, perhaps 20, 30 years ago, that insurance was really just for, emerging people and paying off debt and education, funding and all those sorts of things, takes on a different context, doesn't it, as people acquire wealth? Yeah,
it does. And it can, when you're in a situation where you're fairly affluent, it's very easy to say, look, it's not for me, I don't need it. But given that things take liquidity and time and their costs in terms of structures and legal ramifications for different things, particularly if you've got external business partners, all of these things need to be considered in your insurance plans.
And the documentation, so particularly in the small business space, if you're providing insurance, for business partnerships, for example, what sort of documentation should clients be considering?
So if you're in a situation, particularly when you've got partnerships, you've got multiple families perhaps collaborating, they may or may not have any involvement with each other outside of the business. You really need to have a very clear, what's called a buy-sell agreement between in a partnership agreement that explains what happens in the event that somebody is disabled and can't continue in the partnership, or if somebody passes away prematurely. What are the mechanisms in place to pay out to individuals and change ownership structures? Ultimately, you may not want the beneficiaries of your previous business partner, for example, becoming a core part of your business.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you feel we've missed today?
No, I don't believe so, Mark.
Okay.
So I think I've covered pretty much everything.
Okay. Well, thank you, Matt, and I think that concludes our session today about insurance. I think it's pretty obvious to say that not everybody needs insurance necessarily, but it's certainly worth being considered as part of any strategy development, and it's an important part of the responsibility we have to our clients in the next generation to consider it where necessary. So thank you, and I hope you've got something out of today's session.